Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January Salmon Orca Project Speaker Series. Our speaker series show today is Collaborative Conservation Efforts, and we have our featured speaker here, Eric Crawford. And I would just like to thank everybody for coming today and carving the time out of your day over this lunch period so that you could be here. Before we proceed, let us take a moment to honor and acknowledge the ancestral lands on which we all stand. We recognize and pay respect to the indigenous peoples and tribal nations who have been stewards of these lands for generations. The Salmon Orca Project firmly believes in the power of collaboration and unity. Through this webinar series, we aim to foster a platform where tribal leaders, community members, experts, and stakeholders from various backgrounds can come together, share experiences, and work toward innovative, equitable solutions. Eric Crawford is the North Idaho Field Coordinator for Trout Unlimited, framing and advancing Trout Unlimited's national priority campaign. Removal of the 4 lower Snake River dams and restoration of a free-flowing lower Snake River through collaborative outreach and engagement. In 2019, after 22 years, Eric retired from the Idaho Department of Fish and Game from a position that centered on respect, honesty, and mutually beneficial partnerships. Eric is driven by results and outcomes while comfortable working in varied forums, from the office of elected officials to a bar stool in rural Idaho, knowing everyone has a story and a position. Eric's authenticity conveys the reality of policy and science and how they each impact successful conservation outcomes. An avid hunter and angler, Eric calls Idaho's Palouse home with his family and 2 English settlers. Welcome, Eric, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Angela. It really is an honor to be here today and talking about such an important issue.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so as we aim to inspire others to continue their efforts, that's what brings us here today. Trout Unlimited fosters collaborations with a diverse range of partners, including federal agencies, state partners, tribes, private landowners, and corporate allies. And we're going to talk about each of the communities specifically during this discussion. Eric, so Trout Unlimited has collaborated with tribes like the Yurok tribe. How do you engage with other tribal communities in conversations and conservation efforts, particularly in the context of dam breaching?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it's a very timely question, right? Because of what's going on the lower Snake. But additionally, it seems to be sometimes the answer to that seems to be elusive, I think, within the community, within the conservation community. And I think just for reference, what Angela is talking about is Trout Unlimited's relationship with the Yurok tribe. The Yurok called the Lower Klamath in Northern California and Southern Oregon home. The Yurok tribe is the tribe that is most impacted by the Klamath dams, which now today we recognize as the largest dam removal project within the United States. A pretty momentous accomplishment for everybody involved. And really that really gives us, I think, a foundation in what relationships with the conservation community, particularly organizations like Trout Unlimited and other non-governmental organizations. And a lot of that is fostered really because of a firm belief in Trout Unlimited that our staff are rooted in the communities that we work in. And so in this particular situation with the Klamath and the Yurok tribe, our state director in California, Brian Johnson, is central to this conversation, and particularly this relationship with the Yurok tribe. And in particular, Amy Cordalis, who is, of course, a tribal member. Amy is a staff attorney for the tribe. In addition to that, Amy is on what is now recognized as the Klamath Renewal Corporation, which is a formation which was formed as a result of Pacific Corp relinquishing ownership of the dam complex, and so the Renewal Corporation oversees removal, and that in and of itself is again very momentous, because here you have a diverse group of individuals, from irrigators to NGOs like ourselves, and tribal members, all coming together to facilitate and ultimately remove these dams in a productive manner. And so Brian Johnson right now is actually the director of the Klamath River Renewal Corporation, and helps guide that removal program. But all that is all for naught if we don't understand really why are we doing this. And now, granted, Trout Unlimited is very focused on cold water fisheries restoration, and reconnection and protection. But at the same time, we have to understand that there are more influences than just trout and salmon. These species touch the lives of many people, particularly in the West. It touches the lives, and has for millennia, the tribal members throughout the West. Here in the Pacific Northwest, it is more pronounced than I think anywhere else in the nation, with the density of tribes. And that really shows, really the importance that these species play within these tribal cultures and societies and economies. And without having an understanding of that, as a non-tribal member, it's really hard to articulate that. And in Trout Unlimited, again, because we are rooted in these communities and based in these communities, like any collaborative effort, it takes initiative and motivation to learn who, for lack of better terms, the players are within the region, and who decisions or outcomes may impact. Who has a story, who is related to these fish or connected to these fish in some way. And in this particular example, the Klamath, the Yuroks come to mind. But when it comes to lower Snake River dams, the Snake River Basin, we just have so many tribes within the basin that it is really amazing. Each one of them have a different connection and relationship. But for me, clearly being here today, I have developed a fairly close relationship with Chairman Wheeler of the Nez Perce tribe. That ultimately was a result of, putting the effort in and meeting with Shannon, ultimately initially to do an article for our Trout magazine, kind of providing a perspective, a tribal perspective on what these fish mean for the basin. And really it was eye-opening. And I reflect back on that conversation, a couple of years ago when it occurred, but I still reflect on it, and as we were getting ready, Angela, we were talking about how we have leaders among us. Some of us are, elected leaders or formally recognized leaders, but there is leadership quality in every one of us. And I think that as we work collaboratively, we really become to recognize who these leaders are and what their voices really mean to the conversation, and people like Amy Cordalis with the Yurok tribe is one of those leaders, as well as Chairman Wheeler. There's a great sense of motivation when you hear somebody speak, to honor them, as well as the fish. And so it really is a unique situation within the conservation community for those of us that are non-tribal members to be allowed into the tribal culture in a way, to better understand it and better have a foundation of why we are trying to recover these fish. It's not just about species perpetuation, There's a lot of different factors that go into conservation collaboration, and tribal relationships are hugely important in those conversations, particularly in the West here where we are. Even though we're focusing this on dam breaching in that conversation, I'd be remiss not to mention, outside of, the Klamath and what we're seeing now in the Lower Snake campaign, Trout Unlimited has partnered with tribes again throughout the West. And my coworker, Nate Rees, down in Arizona, who is our state lead down there, worked with the Grand Canyon tribal councils, ultimately to help facilitate the ancestral footprints of the Grand Canyon National Monument that was recognized in August of 2023 by the Biden administration. In total, that successfully protected 1 million acres in the greater Grand Canyon region from any kind of future uranium mining. And so that really accentuates, how diverse and where these conversations really become rooted, and how we can work together for a common cause. And so, both those examples, and I can go on all day of examples for us at TU and how we work in concert with tribes. The Pebble Mine and Bristol Bay campaign in Alaska was really good. Another really great example of our state director up there, Nellie Williams, and her staff working closely with the native corporations up there to really prioritize and highlight the values of that region and ultimately protecting that region. And I think that those, are 3 really great examples for all of us to follow. Really great, strong relationships in collaborative efforts that came with wins, very momentous wins. And I think that we can use those as examples moving forward, particularly in the Lower Snake campaign. But I think all of them really highlight the shared goals and valued insights that motivate each one of us for outcomes, and it really levels the playing field for communities, the natural environment, and, moves society in righting the wrongs of prior generations in relation to environmental and tribal justice. That really, really is a highlight and a success in a lot of these examples.
Thank you for highlighting all of those examples. And I learned something new. I didn't know about the Grand Canyon, but I was aware of the Alaska campaign. And the grassroots conversations, or the grassroots conservation activities base has been an integral, I'm tongue-tied, has been an integral part since 1959. How does Trout Unlimited connect with younger and more diverse grassroots communities to help its conservation mission?
So we are very fortunate at Trout Unlimited to be the oldest and currently largest cold water conservation organization. And that comes with certainly with some struggles, but with some advantages, on the playing field. And really, one of those advantages is our grassroots base. We have approximately 300,000 members and supporters, and that they're spread throughout 385 chapters across the country. And so it really is a impactful opportunity for us at Trout Unlimited as staff to engage with grassroots, to really build momentum on any given project, whether that's roadside litter cleanup, barrier removal, barrier assessments, which a lot of our grassroots do. But it's pretty amazing that, we have over 1,000 conservation projects across the nation led by our grassroots, with 1,600 youth education programs and over 7,000 community engagement activities each year, all led by our grassroots. That really spreads the word. But I think it's really important to really bring back what is the mission of TU. And so it was more recently revised, didn't really deviate from our overall mission prior, but through some strategic planning recently, we have a revised mission. And that is to bring together diverse interests to care for and recover rivers and streams so our children can experience the joy of wild and native trout and salmon. And as you can see, with all those grassroots, we have that opportunity. I think one of the really incredible opportunities that we see, and I think one of the more impactful programs that really our grassroots are responsible for is Trout in the Classroom. So those that are not familiar with Trout in the Classroom, it's been running for approximately 30 years. It brings literally trout to the classroom. It's part of the science, technology, engineering, and math program, formerly now, and really bridges the gap between all those disciplines. And what ultimately happens is that a hosting teacher, doesn't have to be a science teacher by any means, a hosting teacher within school or school district that's willing to participate can connect with us at TU through literally the Trout in the Classroom website, and coordinate with the grassroots or build an even larger program. And what happens is that you end up getting an aquarium into the classroom, refrigeration unit to keep it trout specific temperatures. And then ultimately you start with eyed eggs and watch as these fish mature, ultimately, taking various measurements and observations throughout this maturation period. And then ultimately, depending on what the species is, they may release it into a local stream. Here locally, something that we would be familiar with, Angela, is steelhead in the classroom. Many of the school districts locally participate in that. That is actually run through Idaho Fish and Game. But again, it brings this connection of steelhead and trout and salmon to a classroom that may not know anything about these species. They may be foreign. These students may live in a very urban environment, which I think that we in the conservation industry industry kind of really struggle with trying to figure out how to connect, particularly with Trout Unlimited. We associate trout and salmon and steelhead with free-flowing cold water rivers. Not every community is located on a free-flowing cold river or stream, and so it makes it really hard to connect. But Trout in the Classroom does that. We see programs literally city center in Manhattan in New York City, having Trout in the Classroom, bringing trout to children that otherwise would have no idea about them. And that really, it's not so much about Trout Unlimited. It's ultimately about instilling, hopefully an appreciation for wild things, and to an extent, a conservation ethic, knowing that we have impacts on these species, depending on what we do in our day-to-day lives. And so definitely an awareness. And I think that's probably one of the larger programs that Trout Unlimited is associated with connecting with youth in particular. Again, because of that grassroots base, we are really blessed and privileged to have motivated leaders that have sponsor week-long camps that again introduce these children to all age groups to cold water environments and habitats, trout and salmon and steelhead specifically, and angling, how to fish and how to appreciate these fish, and while instilling a conservation ethic. And so that really is a force multiplier, if you will, in our connection and our efforts, and hopefully building, a generation of children that can appreciate wild things, specifically trout, salmon, and steelhead. So.
Wow. That is incredibly cool to help foster and bring the next generation into an appreciation, to look forward to the stewardship of our wild things, and just really build that connection for them in their growth, and taking that into adulthood with them is really immense. And so with that, I think we will move on to the next question. That was, can you talk about the impact of the 5-year agreement that Trout Unlimited made with the Forest Service for watershed restoration, including specific projects, such as cleaning up abandoned mines and improving fish passages?
Yeah, so Trout Unlimited recently, in November of 2022, along with the U.S. Forest Service, announced our partnership, in part of a national watershed and aquatic restoration initiative, led by the Forest Service. It's a 5-year agreement, and again, this comes with the benefit of being such a large organization, with such a large footprint across the nation. But what it entails is that it's a $40 million investment into aquatic restoration, on national forests and national grasslands, where trout and salmon reside, that's distributed throughout the country. So no specific national forest or region within the national forest is prioritized. It's dictated by already existing needs analysis by the Forest Service. And so it really is an amazing agreement to move forth long overdue restoration projects. But more importantly, I think it's really important to recognize that this is not about Trout Unlimited. We just happen to be the vehicle that is conveying this. Ultimately, this has pretty impressive trickle-down effects to local communities where these impaired aquatic habitats are. And we see that with the hiring of local employees and contractors, specifically. A lot of this stuff doesn't happen with a pickaxe and a shovel. And so this is heavy machinery where skilled operators are needed. That is not in any one of our portfolios as staff at Trout Unlimited. Although I do know some staff like to think they're skilled heavy equipment operators. They are not compared to the professionals. And so not only is that a focus on national forest lands, but it's in relation to tribal lands as well. And so we sit here, Angela, on the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest in north central Idaho, and there are several projects slated as a result of this agreement on the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest, as a priority to remedy some of the wrongs done in the past with lax regulation and logging practices, and mining practices in some of the situations within, specifically the Clearwater Basin, and to move forward and really helping that watershed heal. In addition to that, because these funds are made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law, which the Biden administration, passed just a couple of years ago. And so that's really where this funding comes for this initiative. But in addition to that, we have also kind of expanded on this model and are now working with the Forest Service, the BLM, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to really expand this program. And so so in addition to that initial 5-year agreement with the Forest Service, TU has now secured more than $100 million in federal partnerships through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, both of those funding mechanisms to get these projects going. This is a result of, federal agencies, although they have their missions and their directions within their agencies, oftentimes, and we see this on the NISPERS Clearwater, they're woefully understaffed and overwhelmingly overwhelmed by the amount of administrative tasks that they are faced with, and frankly cannot get these activities done. On a side note, one of my coworkers, Dalton Lambda, who is one of our project managers, is working on a culvert removal project or replacement project on the North Fork of the Clearwater, so just over the hill from us, Angela. And that project has been on the books for almost 10 years, and the Forest Service just hasn't been able to prioritize that. And so, I think that, you look at this, and this is a positive move in the direction of remedying, again, past issues within these watersheds, creating and redeveloping safe drinking water, while at the same time, building habitat for trout, salmon, and steelhead, and then a lot of other species that rely on those cold water habitats and intact habitats. So a really incredible example of collaborative efforts with our federal partners, and then ultimately our communities. Like I said, this is a trickle down opportunity into the communities as we hire contractors and engineers and so on and so forth. And so really is an amazing opportunity.
Thank you for that, Eric. And we do have a couple of questions and comments coming in, and so we will try to make time for those at the end. Let's see. How does Trout Unlimited effectively partner with agricultural producers and ranchers to improve conservation practices and fisheries health?
Yeah, so again, I take a lot of this for granted, and to an extent, Angela, I'm sure you do. But the reality is, and I think that a lot of us are aware of this, but those of you that are not, agriculture in the West is inextricably connected to our rivers for irrigation needs. And so just like anything else, as we improve our thought processes and technologies, there's opportunities for water conservation and also to reduce impacts to native species. Locally, we can look at one of our project managers here in Idaho in the Lemhi Valley, where Matt Green partnered with the Bueller Ranch on the upper Lemhi in central Idaho, a tributary to the Salmon River, just out of Salmon, Idaho. And so over the course of 12 years, this incredible rehabilitation and restoration project unfolded before everybody's eyes. The Lemhi has native and wild spring chinook, summer chinook, and summer steelhead in it. And so by no fault of the Buellers, there was pretty incredible degradation to the existing habitat. And so, this is oftentimes willing cooperator or rancher or irrigator that really comes to us and some of our partners wanting to get a better understanding of how they can improve not only a return on their dollar with saving water and prioritizing and efficiently using what they do have water rights too, but then also, as incredible stewards of the resource that we see with ranchers and farmers, they're always concerned about the natural environment and how do they lessen their impact. And so, again, I opened up with this idea that, we have this incredible opportunity as staff being decentralized. We don't have a central office other than our main Arlington office. We live in the communities that we work in. That affords us an incredible opportunity to build relationships or expand on the relationships that we currently have and have had for a very long time. And Matt Green really is an example of that. His family grew up in our longtime residents of Salmon. Everybody knows the Green family. So that really helps, knocking on a door, engaging with in this instance, DeBuehler Ranch to further that along. But we have examples throughout the nation, and we can look, a little bit to the west and north of us. And she is now retired, but Lisa Pelly in 2016 worked with the Methil Valley Irrigation District and the Washington Department of Ecology to modernize a leaky and inefficient ditch system in the Methil. And again, these type of conversations cannot be had without having the trust and of your community partners. That's something that we at Trout Unlimited take very seriously, is our representation of the organization and how we project the organization, and we want to be good community partners and strive to perpetuate that, in everything that we do. In the case of Lower Snake, I think that everybody recognizes that breaching of the 4 Lower Snake River dams will have an outsized impact on the agricultural industry. It's easy for me to continually to talk to our grassroots at Trout Unlimited, who overwhelmingly agree with our position that the only way to recover salmon and steelhead in the basin is to breach the 4 Lower Snake River dams. But where the rubber meets the road is the other constituencies out there, the other stakeholders, particularly the agricultural interests. It would be really, really difficult for me as a staffer at TU if I lived in, say, Seattle or something, to come over here and airdrop and try to have a conversation with a producer, right? It just doesn't go very far. I have an in-depth understanding of the economy here, the impacts that ultimately affect production and or their bottom dollar. Because I've been a resident here for a long time, even prior to coming into TU, you always have that word of mouth reputation, and you hope it's a good reputation and it's going to get you inside the door, or at least an invitation back. And so that's always, the mantra that we have as staff, whether it's our restoration work or our policy engagement and outreach work. We really stand by this understanding and appreciation for what collaboration is.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it really does. It really does. You have to stand on your shoulders with your relationship building and networking, and the agricultural industry. They're no different with that. They want to know. It's good for us to know who they are, and they want to know us personally. Moving along, science plays a critical role in guiding conservation efforts. How does Trout Unlimited collaborate with its national network of scientists and program staff to include scientific research into its conservation strategies?
So that's a really great question, and one of the things that really drew me Trout Unlimited initially as a staffer is our commitment to the science. We have, for an organization like us, we have a very robust science team based conveniently for me in Boise, Idaho. And that's led by Dr. Helen Neville. And Helen is an incredible geneticist, specifically on salmonids, but also, distills the scientific information and provides clarity in the stuff that I can't wrap my mind around, but has a poise about her and the ability to put it into plain speak. So those of us that are laymen in the sciences, particularly fishery science, if that happens to be you, is very, very helpful. And so Helen oversees 9 other science staff, from our director of fishery science and Dan Dewalter to our GIS staff, and a couple other salmon and steelhead specific staff, along with resident trout scientists. And so again, that really, all of our decisions are made based on science, and that is a really great position to be in, to have the support staff. And again, like I mentioned, we are so blessed with the ability to have such a robust support system in the science realm as a conservation organization. In today's time, fisheries science has evolved immensely in the last 20 years. And so, we have to be aware of climate impacts and climate modeling when we're trying to figure out where best to put in investments in restoration work. What is the long-term outlook for a specific watershed that right now is imperative for salmon and steelhead. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why we are so adamant about breaching the 4 lower Snake River dams, is because of this high elevation, climate resilient habitat that we see in the Snake River Basin. If it were not for that, it might be a hard thing to reconcile. But we know moving forward that the significance of the current habitat would only expand, particularly for the distribution of salmon and steelhead through the West Coast. And so they also help us in process-based restoration decisions. As I said, Helen's classically trained geneticist in fisheries. And so conservation genetics are really important to us, along with salmon and steelhead demographics. And those, honestly, you can look to the Klamath as an example of that, which will be, volitional reintroduction. So voluntary reintroduction of those species above where they couldn't pass the lower dam. But then Elwha is a really great example of fishery science in action, knowing full well from dam breaching that we will see the redistribution and resurgence of, what may have been, close to extinction populations. One of the incredible things through science that we got to bear witness to is the resurgence of a summer steelhead run of steelhead that were present in the Elwha that frankly was forgotten. So the Elwha, as many of us are aware, is over on the Olympic Peninsula. Pretty much Western Oregon and Western Washington are all winter steelhead runs. It's just the interior that we see summer steelhead runs, and has a lot to do with run timing. But for whatever reason, the Elwha had kind of a repressed summer steelhead population within its resident rainbow trout. And so once we had connection to the saltwater, we saw this resurgence of anadromy. So that life stage of going out to the ocean for these resident rainbows in the form of summer steelhead. So pretty amazing. And that's, as a result of science. And so again, it's really, really important to us at TU. It grounds us in all of our decisions.
Thank you for that. And so we are down to our last question before we go ahead and take questions and field comments and questions from the audience. And I know that, let's see. I know that you've partnered, Trout Unlimited has partnered with corporate allies like Intel and Facebook. Could you provide any examples of innovative water management projects and how these collaborations strategically advance Trout Unlimited's mission?
Yeah, and I think to be specific, particularly with the Intel partnership. So that was through a very specific partnership and initiative that Intel had. And so that is specific to the Colorado River drainage. And so it's an area down on the Colorado River, which formerly created a reservoir with no connection to the river. Although the portions of the Colorado there are blue ribbon, a trout stream, identified by the state. And it flowed through what's called the Luster Farm, and is a property on the western edge of the Mountain Island Ranch, and functioned as a 530-acre alfalfa hay farm to support a cattle operation. And as ultimately the Luster Farm was beginning to transition into a wildlife agricultural interface. And so fortunately, and I think, you heard me talk about this partnership with the Forest Service earlier, and these immense amounts of money. And so, I mean, it's no secret, restoration work takes a lot of money. And so conservation takes a lot of money, period. And so this is really one example that through an agreement with the Intel Corporation, and luckily Trout Unlimited, again, we have such a large footprint, we were able to partner with the Luster Farm to reroute the Colorado River, creating connectivity in that example. But it ends up being bigger than just Intel. So that Colorado connectivity project, the other corporations involved in that was the Pepsi-Cola beverages of North America, Frito-Lay, Coca-Cola, and one of the local mining companies down there, Climax, Molybdenum. And so I think that sometimes you have to dig deep to figure out what a corporation's environmental footprint is and awareness. But I can tell you, as you dig, you will be surprised at the commitment that a lot of these companies have to conservation in various forms. And these, Intel is a very, very large semiconductor company, but they have a portion of their portfolio dedicated to conservation. Not so specific to water management and river restoration, but another partner was the Tiffany Company, so Tiffany Jewelry Company, and the foundation's Responsible Mining Program awarded more than $4 million to support nonprofits like Trout Unlimited in remediating land and watersheds throughout the U.S. But they were also very prolific within the Pebble Mine, Bristol Bay campaign, signaling opposition to that. And so I think that take-home message, there are these well-known allies, right, that we collaborate with, our other conservation partners. We opened with this discussion about our allies within the tribes of the West and the nation for that matter. But it seems that you have to dig deep, and many times some of your best allies are at times the very corporations that you thought you were at odds with. And again, that takes a little bit of deep diving to understand those relationships. But at the same time, I think, there has to be some optimism in conservation and conservation collaboration, that, we're all there for a similar outcome. And these examples, with these two large corporations within the US are really, really great examples, on a much smaller scale, specific to the Lower Snake campaign. I think it was 3 years ago now, we ran an ad in several of the newspapers with over 200 businesses and corporations supporting breach of Lower Snake. Those are from little mom and pop fly shops all the way up to companies like Orbis, which, would not be a surprise to anybody for our relationship with Orbis at Trout Unlimited. But again, that really shows, I think, the optimism that we all have to have, that we all want a better future, and I think that in a way, many of us believe, even though we may not have been aware of it before this seminar today, but I think a lot of us really can wrap our minds around the idea of TU's mission to bring together diverse interests to care for and recover rivers and streams, so our children can experience the joy of wild and native trout and salmon. And so I think I'll leave it at that for right now. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a long list of questions, so we're going to work through those as best we can. The first one is, Doug was interested in bringing lamprey to this conversation. Do you have any comments about specific lamprey efforts?
So that's a really great question, and I know, a really important species with the tribal cultures, specifically the Nez Perce in the Columbia Snake Basin. So we are as an organization, I might not get this right, but my coworker Michael often says, "Trout's in our name; it's our game," and so that really is where our focus is trout and salmon populations throughout North America. That's not to say that the work that we do does not have beneficial impacts on other species. And I think that that's really, an important take-home message. Although, many times at Trout Unlimited, we represent ourselves, advocating on behalf of salmon and steelhead. At the same time, we're working on a land protection campaign, as I noted with Nate Rees, and what is the long-term impact? It may be land protection, but that has an outsized impact on a number of species. And that's something that we really recognize within Trout Unlimited. It may not be a specific trout species or salmon species, but ultimately a lot of other species benefit.
Thank you for that. And we recently did a speaker series on the lamprey. You can also take a look at that at the Salmon Orca YouTube page and take a look at the history of some of the topics that we have covered, and lamprey is one of them. And so moving along, Danielle wanted to hear some more information about the youth education work. And I know that you mentioned that it is on your website. And so I was wondering if you could maybe provide us with the website or any further information about youth education work.
Yeah, so if you just specific, so again, we talked about this earlier with our grassroots. Our grassroots really lead a lot of our youth outreach and engagement. And so as staff, not necessarily what I spend my time on, not as a result of it not being important, it's just not in my work portfolio. Things like Trout in the Classroom, there's a dedicated website for that we have. And if you just Google Trout Unlimited, Trout in the Classroom, it'll pop up, and that can connect you to the program and staff for that. So, yep.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay. What is the fundamental need or support that makes a campaign successful? Funds, political support, community support, or great marketing ideas? What in your opinion makes for the most successful support?
All the above. Is that one of the options? I think, first and foremost, for who asked that question, is optimism. You cannot be involved in this line of work and working on a conservation campaign without optimism. There are roadblocks everywhere you look for successful outcomes. And again, optimism, I think, is probably one of the most important things. That list, and all jokes aside, that list of things, funds, political support, community support, great marketing ideas, those are all equally important. I think what I've found is that we talked about this earlier, is understanding who your allies are, understanding who the opposition is, and reconciling with that, and understanding where that opposition really comes from. I work on our snake campaign specifically. This campaign impacts hundreds of thousands of individuals, from utility or electricity consumers, to agricultural interest, to transportation interest, to tribal nations, to anglers throughout the basin, to users of the resource in a variety of ways. And when you start looking at such a large campaign, it ends up being baby steps, but you really need to take a look at it and understand, what are, the obstacles ahead of you, and how do you overcome them? And you overcome them with each one of those things, noted in the question.
So there was a further comment from Doug. I recently pasted on Chief would always say that our lamprey are canaries of our waters, and we need to pay attention to them. Lamprey directly affect trout, salmon, steelhead, and chinook. Thank you for your questions and comments, Doug. And I think there's a few more personal questions that I can answer off screen, and so I've taken those down to answer later. And so I think that concludes our question and answer and discussion period at this time. Thank you so much, Eric. Did you have any further comments to wrap up anything?
I just really appreciate you, Angela, and the Salmon Orca Project for bringing not only this conversation to everybody's attention, but all the previous seminars in the series. They're definitely a great avenue for engagement, and I hope that everybody learns and becomes motivated by what you hear in these. I'd be remiss to say, please engage on the Lower Snake campaign. Help us at Trout Unlimited and our partners recover wild Chinook and steelhead and sockeye to the basin, and help us get the investments necessary to transition away from the current hydro system. With that, I thank you so much for this opportunity. It truly is an honor.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in today and joining us live, and for your participation in the questions and comments that you provided to make this an engaging webinar. And if you have colleagues or friends that you would like to share this with, it will be available on YouTube as of tomorrow. So you just head on over to YouTube, go to Salmon Orca, the Salmon Orca Project, and there you will find our video, and it should be available to us tomorrow. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you.